Hey, Josh, welcome to the show again, and I'm excited to have you here.
Thanks,
Um,
Michael.
and so why don't you share with us, take a moment and share with us who you are, what you do, and then we're gonna dive into the breakthrough, the bottleneck breakthrough that you have today.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah, I've been doing management consulting really is the umbrella for small businesses. I've been doing that for about 13 years, started out helping small businesses with their marketing. And I had been fortunate enough to work with a guy named Chet Holmes and his partner in one of their businesses, Tony Robbins, and became the marketing director of that company for a couple of years and cut my teeth early on and was able to go from there and out on my own into consulting. And so I did a lot of marketing and help businesses there, and then realized, oh, not everybody needs leads. They maybe have enough leads. They need systems and they need a way to fulfill on those leads effectively. And so it'd be this 1-2 punch of marketing and systems and marketing and systems. And then I just realized, there's typically one thing holding a company back. And I just started calling them bottlenecks. And I knew I hadn't invented anything, but it was the way my brain worked. And so let's just tackle the biggest bottleneck you got and let's fix it and optimize it and manage it and move on. And growth started happening. And so in 2015, I wrote a book called Bottleneck Breakthrough and published it in 2017. My wife challenged me to write it. She said, have you ever thought of writing a book? And I was like, well, I have, but I don't know what I'd write about. She says, just get started. You'll figure it out. And it
Okay.
forced me to really define how my brain works and how I walk through finding and fixing bottlenecks for small businesses. And it's pretty much what I've done since. And it expands to cover management and recruiting. And because there's really three legs of a business of getting clients, fulfilling clients, and then growing the team. And so I like tackling all of it. And my favorite thing really is helping business owners that are ready to break through their mental bottlenecks, because that's ultimately what holds the company back. And then I lean into sales a lot of times because there's just always deals waiting right there to get unlocked. So if I could step in and help with that and then expand the relationship, it's super fun and fulfilling.
It's awesome. Thank you for that. And so share with me the moment when when you told yourself that, hey, I had to launch this bottleneck stuff. And then you
Yeah.
mentioned earlier that sometimes you don't need leads. You just need to figure out, about something about business that didn't work. I just want to hear more about the very first client or project that you really apply the concept of bottleneck.
Yeah. There were two that I write about in my book. They were one was a client that came through our mutual friend Perry Marshall and Ben Gorelick. He had a alternative education program called the Mountain Training School. And it was a 4-year program for people to go become mountain guides or ski instructors or rock climbing instructors. And it was involved. It was a big program, and he had done a great job getting it off the ground. But he came to me in 2014 and he was running into that $1 million ceiling. He was doing about 800 grand a year at that point. And he thought he needed operations manuals. He thought he needed the systems because his staff wasn't able to get everything done all the time. And so I sat down with him. I'm like, well, what are you spending your time on? And he was spending at that time about 20 to 25 hours a week in conversations on Zoom or phone with prospective students. And I said, okay, what are you covering? He says, well, a lot of application questions, curiosity, figuring out how to get their parents to sign off on it, whatever. And I said, well, how many are you closing? Like, how many are signing up? And he says, oh, maybe 1 to 2 a month. And I was like, man, that's a lot of conversations for not very many closes. And so I said, well, what if we change it where we actually force them to apply like a university where they have an application process, a formal interview process, and the like. And so he worked on it. He came up with a 55 question application. Took him about an hour to fill it out, anybody that was a prospect. But when they filled it out, they were much more qualified. Then he'd have an application review consultation.
Mhm.
That would be a half an hour. And he went from 20 to 25 hours a week down to 3 to 5 hours a week. And then from closing 1 to 2 a month out of all those hundreds of hours of calls, he was closing 1 to 2 a week. And so his close rate went through the roof. His time invested went way down. And he realized, oh, I don't need systems documentation. I just needed more free time so I could manage my staff. And so that's somebody right there who had too many leads and wasn't processing them effectively, was giving them too much of his time, giving them too much of his attention. And I see this a lot with a lot of small business owners where early on, we're all desperate for leads, right? Like if we don't have a lead, we don't have a business. So we get addicted early on to leads solve everything. Traffic solves everything. Sales solves everything. Well, once you get to a certain size, and it's typically the first threshold is $1 million. Once you get there, you've got leads coming in. You've got enough momentum. Now it's time to organize and get some operations in place, get some qualifications in place. And so that was one where, and from there, I can talk later about some of the other things we tackled, but we ended up unlocking about 65% growth that first year, just from that one change it to an application. And he went from 795,000 to 1.35 million in a year, just from that one change. And he had more time freedom, which is counterintuitive because people think, oh, if my revenue goes up, I'm going to have to work harder. Right. And
that's right. That's right.
But there's $100 million companies that the CEO or the owner doesn't work harder than somebody making $1 million a year. They don't work 100 times harder. They just work smarter.
Absolutely. So what was the takeaway with Ben project that you said, hey, I hit something special here, and then
it was realizing that if we find the biggest bottleneck and go and fix it, growth happens. There's a lot of times where business owners are trying to tackle a problem that they think is a big problem or they're excited to solve. Entrepreneurs like a lot of novelty, right? Like we like new things, we like creating, we like innovating. And so there's a lot of things that entrepreneurs put their energy to that when they go implement it, they may put months and months into it. They may put lots of money into it. They may have their staff work on something for a long time. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really move the needle. It doesn't increase revenue consistently. It doesn't increase profit, and it doesn't reduce chaos, right? Reduce the headache of managing a small business. And so when I saw that with Ben, that just that one change, it seems simple from if you step back at all the things going on in that business, right? He's got 3-week expeditions at Denali National Park on the ice cap with 12 students and guides and has to get everybody up there. There's a lot of chaos in making that happen. He's got another facility in Chile, and they're out on the Patagonia ice cap doing expeditions there. And then he's got rock climbing in Spain, and he's flying between all these locations. And I don't know if you've realized, but Alaska to southern Chile is about 22 hours of flying with no layovers, right? Then to Spain is way over here, right? Like, so this guy's flying all over the world, and it can feel like, man, there's such bigger things to deal with in that operation. He was getting certified by national governing bodies of higher education and mountain guiding and stuff. All of those things seem really important, right? And it's not that they're not important, but where he was at that exact moment, he needed to free up his time. And so that's always where I start with business owners is, where are you spending an inordinate amount of time? And like our friend Perry talks about, where's the $1,000 or $10,000 an hour activities that you need to be doing? And if you're been on the phone taking 20 to 25 hours a week of applications and you're only getting 1 or 2 of those a month to convert, that's a lot of wasted time. So for me, it was looking at if we could make this more efficient and free up his time. I didn't expect it to convert that much better. I just expected it to get rid of all the unqualified people. So it was a double benefit. We got rid of the unqualified people and we closed the more qualified ones better because they felt like there was a more professional experience. They felt it was more legitimate. So that one thing, that one activity of creating that application leveled up the company in a big way, perception-wise, operations, efficiency, conversion, and freed up Ben's time. So that's when I realized, and I had been noodling around with the idea of bottlenecks for probably the prior 6 or 7 years in my own entrepreneurial career. I just hadn't formalized it in a way of how do we find the bottleneck? Because when we unlock the bottleneck, growth happens. And so then around that same time, I had a civil engineering firm, and they were working with a lot of municipalities. They were like the public works department, outsourced public works department for these little farm towns around Fresno where I live. And the city of Sanger had been their longest standing client of 21 years. And the city manager was mad because projects had gone sideways. And the senior engineer at the engineering firm was semi-retired, and he was just kind of phoning it in, wasn't really doing detailed project management. And the new city manager had a couple projects that got rolled up to them, and everybody was mad, and they wanted to blame the engineer, which was right. I mean, the engineer dropped the ball. And so they said, we're doing a new request for proposal, a new RFP. We're going to get a new engineering firm in here. You guys can compete with it, but it's a level playing ground. Anybody can apply.
Complain.
Yeah. And so they were like, Josh, what do we do? I was helping them rewrite some case studies, some small project stuff. And I said, well, let's look at your proposals. And they said, oh, Johannes handles that. He's our traffic engineer, but he handles all of our new business. So I went and met with Johannes, and I said, hey, tell me about your proposals. He's like, oh yeah, they're right here. He's got a big stack of them. They're all spiral bound and bullet points. And I'm looking at them, and they just look kind of boring and plain to me, but I'm like, no judgment. How many have you gone after over what time frame? He says, yeah, about the last year and a half, I've gone after 54 RFPs. I'm like, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a whole lot. I mean, you know how it is. You've gone after RFPs yourself in your own business. That's a lot of time. And this is a civil engineer that they bill out at $150 an hour. So when he's not doing billable traffic engineering work, that's an opportunity cost to the company, right? And so I said, okay, you did 54. How many did you win? And he says 4. I'm like,
more like less than 10%.
Yeah, it's 7% exactly. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, were they big? He says, no, they're all kind of small, like $25,000 to $50,000 projects, which is really small in the engineering space. So I did the math, and I was like, the opportunity cost, the hard cost of going after them, all of it was about $2,000 per RFP to the firm. So it's about $108,000, and they got about $150,000 in revenue. Well, typical civil engineering firm runs at 15% profit. So they lost 80 grand going after those projects. And so I said, okay, these proposals are no good. We're not going to use these. I'll come up with a new proposal. And so I came up with it. I sketched it out, worked with a graphic designer that I've worked with, and we created a 32-page booklet. It was full color. It was saddle stitched, so it's stapled in the middle. I went out and took a picture of the water tower in Sanger, put that on the cover. We had testimonials from other city managers on city letterhead in the back that was full color printed. And we submitted that. We had 3 weeks to do it, and we submitted it. And also in the process, I said, get a new senior engineer out there to manage, get rid of the old semi-retired partner that kept dropping the ball. So they got a new young guy that was eager and energetic to go out there. And we had about 2 months after we submitted the proposal until they were going to decide. So that engineer is building a relationship over 2 to 3 months. They get our proposal and they go, who created this for you? They said, why? And they said, it's really nice. We want to talk to whoever helped you, because we want to create proposals like this to bring other companies out to set up in Sanger. And so they never reached out to me, but it stood out that much to the city manager, the review committee, and they canceled the RFP because the new senior engineer that went out there and our proposal was so impressive. They're like, you redeemed yourself. We'll work with you. And so I was like, great. That was awesome. We saved him. But then we said, okay, this worked so well. Let's make this a template. Let's create this proposal to go after other RFPs now. And over the next year, I created a rubric saying an RFP is only worthwhile if it meets these criteria. It's got to be big enough. We've got to know somebody at the organization. It's got to be in our sweet spot of services projects we've done. And they went after 14 RFPs, and they landed 11 of them.
Jeez.
So they went from 7.5% close rate to 77% close rate. And those 11 accounted for $3.3 million in revenue, not $50,000 in revenue or whatever. And so that created a ton of growth. And then for them, they needed more engineers. So then we got into recruiting, and that was the next bottleneck. And just those two, getting the RFPs right and fixing the recruiting funnel, they doubled in 2 years. So they went from 2.2 million to a little more than double to 4.7 million in 2 years. And now they're doing over 10 million. They got to 10 million after 5 years. So
So I bet
That
you apply some sort of copywriting to the new RFP to make it more, more apparently more appeal and more like stand out apparently in that sense but out of many problems, I'm curious, even for the Ben case and for the engineering case, out of so many problems, so many pockets, but how which one to pick, like what problem to dive in and
yeah, it's a great question. So in the engineering firm case, it was acute. They had to save that RFP process. They had to save that client. So I was just problem solving of, okay, we have to play the game of submitting an RFP, and the one they've got is horrible. So that I got to create and innovate. And as a marketer, as a copywriter, and a salesperson, I knew we can't think like an engineer, right? We can't just check the boxes and fill out the bullet point list. But in Ben's case, it was starting with the owner's time. That's the first point that I always start with is if the owner doesn't have time to think, to plan, to communicate, doesn't matter what else we do. So that's got to be the first thing, because there's a great Silicon Valley entrepreneur and venture capitalist named Naval Ravikant. And he has a great line that says, a busy calendar and a busy mind will prevent you from doing great things.
Busy calendar, busy mind.
And if the entrepreneur is so busy that they're just walking around fire extinguisher in both hands, being a fireman every day, putting out fires, it doesn't matter what ideas I come up with. It doesn't matter what ideas they're given by the most brilliant business minds in the world. They're not going to have any ability to implement it. So that's the first thing is, where are they spending an inordinate amount of time? Because it's really, really easy for a lot of entrepreneurs. We all like fixing things. We all like solving problems. We all like getting results. But if you're doing that over and over and over, you're never going to get ahead. Then the next thing is where are you most frustrated? Because most entrepreneurs have an idea of what's needed in their business, but because they don't have any time, they don't think about it consciously. They're just kind of low-level general frustration under the surface. And so if we take some time and start writing down, what are you frustrated at? And a lot of times it'll be the typical things like, oh, my employees are flaky, right? How many times have you heard that? And it's like, okay, well, why are they flaky? Well, they just don't do what they're supposed to. Well, have you shown them? Have you told them? And so then that becomes management communication, right? Are you communicating as a manager clearly? Is there a case where you've got really talented people, they just don't know what to do because you've not given them the training or the communication or reinforcement? Or you have really lousy people that need to be upgraded and replaced, but you haven't confronted them and you haven't shown them how they're misperforming. And you haven't thought through like how you're going to replace them, because a lot of small business owners hate recruiting and hate the effort of trying to find staff.
Yeah.
So like, then it becomes, okay, are you putting up with poor performance because you're insecure, lazy, frustrated, whatever, on wanting to confront it and replace them? So it's kind of just going through this checklist. And then I look at revenue. Like if somebody is bleeding revenue, then we go there, because it's all short term in these conversations so far of how do we get relief, right? How do we get the owner some free time? How do we reduce some frustration? And how do we resolve revenue?
Right. But let's say about that. And then I want to ask you about this. So you're saying is that most business owners, the moment they wake up, the moment they want to sleep, the next day they wake up, they're all thinking, how do we get new leads? And how do we get new leads? They need to find another silver bullets to get more leads.
Yeah.
And then, so can you help me demystify that and why silver bullet fails to address that?
Yeah, I know it's a great question. I think modern society, this is going to be a little philosophical, right? Modern society, let's call it the last 100+ years, since the Industrial Revolution, since the creation of machines and leverage, is amazing. We benefit amazingly from it, but it also brings a weak spot in that humans, like all animals, want to be lazy. And we want to be efficient with our energy and efficient with our focus. And so, unfortunately, what's happened is there's a whole world of companies, gurus, providers, whatever, that promise that they can solve your problem with this much effort, this easily. And it feeds our lazy lizard brain, I call it, right? We've got the subconscious, or the internal brain, that's less complex than our prefrontal cortex. It's what recognizes threats.
Shortcut.
It wants the shortcuts, right? It wants
Yeah,
the fastest path to calories. It wants the fastest path to energy. That's why people get addicted to caffeine drinks, right? Or stimulants, is because that part of their brain's like, hey, I can feel good for a while, and let's just drink this. And I feel good. I don't have to worry about, am I getting enough sleep? Am I de-stressing? Am I working out? Do I have good relationships? Like, just give me caffeine and I feel good for a little while, right? And so that's what all of these silver bullets prey on, right? They really are. And I don't think the people peddling them are all necessarily manipulative. I know a lot of info marketers out there, and most of them are good guys and think that they're trying to help, but they don't take the time to look at the results that their people aren't getting. And so I think that's the hard part, is working through bottlenecks. Actually solving the problems in your business can be really hard work, because it challenges your own internal beliefs about yourself, about how you're supposed to show up, about how the company business demands that you level up your skills and abilities. And so that's where a lot of business owners I work with, we can get some results, but they kind of tap out because that owner isn't willing to look internally at the next level to get past that next point. And so we part as friends, because I'm not going to fight them to work harder on their internal stuff than I am. Or than they are, I mean. And so I think that's the hard part, is silver bullets just feed our lazy lizard brain so much. To me, it's kind of like the concept of retirement, right? Retirement's a new idea in the last 100 years. It never existed in the history of the world. But a lot of people get fixated on it, right? They're like, oh, if I just put in 30 years with this job and I hate it, then I can retire. Or if I can win the lottery, then I can retire young, and all these things. And it's like, well, is retirement even necessary? Is it right? Should we retire? Like, what does that look like, right?
That's a good way to think about it. With the trend that even was that Harrison Ford came back to
Indiana Jones, like right? 80s. It's amazing. I mean, Clint Eastwood's still producing, and he's almost 90, and it's like
unbelievable, right? So it is the line of retirements, and exactly what you're saying is that what exactly are we doing?
So the silver bullets is a great question. And I think if more business owners can discipline themselves to not need that, let's say, our dopamine button right here in our brain that feels good because it's something new, if they can have discipline to not keep pushing that dopamine button of, oh, there's a new course, oh, there's a new product, oh, there's a new platform. I mean, just this week, I'm sure you saw Threads come out from Meta, Twitter's competitor, right? It's just Instagram without pictures. And like, how many people are going to create how to make $1 million on Threads product in the next week, right? I mean, it's just,
there's another slew of people making a lot of money by hitting the dopamine.
That's it. Yeah.
And you mentioned a lot from your conversation that entrepreneurs, they hit some sort of like revenue ceilings or the plateau, if you will. Mm-hmm. Maybe can you walk me through several plateau? Rev plateau that you mentioned, and the characteristic of the business owner in each of the stage.
Yeah, happy to. So I was talking with business owners when I was working for Chet Holmes, and I just started seeing patterns. It was the first time I had had that many conversations with business owners, and this was 2008, and the recession, it was full on, and I started recognizing the things they were complaining about. I started recognizing patterns around it. So I was like, oh, this makes sense. And I could say, like, if they called me up and they're like, yeah, we're at 5 million. And I could tell them a couple things that I'd seen patterns. They're like, do you have a camera set up in my office? Are you spying on me? That's exactly what we're dealing with. And so I started recognizing these patterns. And so the first real bottleneck in revenue ceiling hits right at $1 million. And It's because at $1 million, most businesses can have all their staff report directly to the owner. The owner's still within reach. Everybody has a one-to-one relationship with the owner up until $1 million. But typically in most businesses, a lot of professional service businesses, especially at $1 million, the owner starts realizing, mostly subconsciously, that if they close more business, if they get to $1.5 million or $2 million, that the fulfillment issues start creeping in more, and it creates more of a mess for them to have to clean up. And so they start throttling themselves. They start not pursuing more business because it means more headaches for them.
Mm-hmm.
And what they really need 9 times out of 10, and I remember 9 times out of 10 because most entrepreneurs are visionary. They're the salesperson. They're the one that can cast the vision, get things done, get the troops rallied and excited, but they're not the detail manager, right? And so what they need is an operations manager, somebody that's going to manage fulfillment and make sure that the trains are going out on time and everybody's showing up on time and clients are happy, and get that off of the entrepreneur's plate, the business owner's plate, because at that point, that's just details in most business owners' mind. It's like, yeah, I could do it, but I don't enjoy doing it. I'd rather have the rest of my team do it. So then I can go onto the front end of getting more clients. And so right at that $1 million,
and that's between $1 and $2 million. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Between 1 and 2 million, you need that operations manager. Now, this isn't a COO, a chief operating officer. That title's too big for this role. And even operations manager might be too high. Maybe it's an office manager, somebody that, and you don't want to over title too soon, because then people, when you really need them to step up at that level, aren't able to. If the company gets bigger, let's say to 5 million, and that operations manager really was more of an office manager, and now you need them to be a COO, and they can't do either, then you run into an issue of probably having to fire them or reframe how their role is. So don't call them a COO, even if they
set the expectation too soon.
Set the expectation too soon. Yeah. So that's 1 to 2 million. Once you get to 2 million, this is the decision where you have to choose, do you want to keep it around here and turn it into a cash cow, a company that runs without you, that's really, really profitable and runs smoothly? Or do you want to scale it to the next level? And I'd say the target you should be aiming for is 10 million if you're going to scale it. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But so those decisions really impact what you do, right? Because a cash cow stays kind of static, doesn't really grow. People don't have a lot of job growth, but they could have a great job. And so that's a different culture than a company that needs to grow to 10 million, because all those roles need to expand. You need to keep expanding your market. You have to push marketing. So 2 very different decisions. So if you're 2 to 3 million and you want to turn it into a cash cow, then you're looking to make it run really, really efficiently and really, really smoothly. And so you may want to expand, get one salesperson if you've been doing all the sales. And so you get that off of your plate. And then you've got your operations manager making fulfillment go smoothly. And then maybe you have a part-time bookkeeper slash CFO that's a fractional CFO that's giving you advice once a month, but they're not full-time, right? So that's turning it into a cash cow. If you want to scale at 2 to 3 million, then the first thing you really need to do is look at leveling up your client size. And that's what we did with the engineering firm. Was we went after bigger and bigger clients, because it's just as much effort to close $100,000 project as it is to close $1 million project. But you typically have to level up your positioning, level up your messaging, level up the quality of the marketing materials or proposals you put out there. And so it's a maturing process. And that's the most common thing, is right around 2 to 3 million as you're moving up market.
Fantastic. Oh, I didn't know
so
that.
When we get, then the next revenue plateau is 5 million. And this is kind of purgatory, because nobody wants a $5 million company. You don't want it. It's kind of impossible to turn it into a cash cow. And I'll tell you why in a second. But if you're trying to scale it and you're stuck at 5 million, you're really frustrated, because your problems at 5 million are 3 to 5 times larger than your problems at 2 to 3 million. And so if you've been managing by whack-a-mole, like you're just playing that game when the moles pop up and you hit them, when you get to 5 million, the moles are the size of me and they're standing there waiting to be solved. And they stack up behind one another and until you solve them. And everybody in your company is waiting for you to solve them. And so the reason there's no such thing as a $5 million cash cow, in my opinion, is because by the time you get to 5 million, you've got your lead gen machine rolling. I mean, the flywheel is spinning and you got leads that you're going to have regardless whether you want them or not. And so if you have things running smoothly, you're going to close more business and you're just going to go to 10 million. But if you're stuck at 5 million, it's because things aren't going smoothly and everything's waiting on you. And so the big thing that you need at 5 million is you need 2 to 3 key executive managers. So that that operations manager becomes COO here. That bookkeeper levels up to become CFO here. And that marketing manager grows to become CMO, Chief Marketing Officer here. Because you need people that can run those departments, make those decisions, and execute without you having to give input on everything. And you have to set the vision. You have to continue to be the brand ambassador. You have to continue to put your company out there. And so that's the shift. And without that leadership, and you don't necessarily get it in right at 5 million, you get it in at 3.5 or 4 million, and may have to hire ahead of the revenue, may have to hire, but the growth is happening, right? And so what happens is you blow by 5 million if you're doing it right, where you may end the year at 5 million, but you don't end the next year near 5 million. You ended at 7, 8, 9, 10 million. And so that becomes the differentiator, is you need other leaders in the company that can make hard decisions that you trust, that you don't have to have an input on every little thing.
So you are more like a cultural building, like builder stuff, just to rally the group, and build a culture, set the vision you said, and then let the key executive do the work.
Exactly. And then 10 million is really kind of the holy grail of getting out of the small business space. You get into the mid-sized business space, and that's where you start adding verticals. So maybe you specialize in, for the engineering firm, they specialized in municipalities up to that point. But right to get to 10 million, they started expanding into big government contracts. So like they did a project at an air base and they did construction management. So they added that offering to their projects where they're engineering them and now they're managing the construction of them. So that adds verticals or adds vertical integration. So those are other things you could do once you get to 10 million.
Got it. So now you already described the challenges of business owners in each of the revenue level from $500,000 to $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, and 10 millions. Now let's shift gear to talk about how the bottleneck breakthrough methodology can really address the growth in those situations.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, the framework has 6 levers. We have marketing and sales, then we have management and systems, and those are kind of the operations. Those are how things are done every day. And then we've got vision, mindset, and strategy. And really, the vision is the most important to start with, because that says, where are you going? What do you want to create? What's the lifestyle you want? If you don't have that business serving your lifestyle, then it doesn't really matter what decisions you make, because you don't know where you're going to end up. And then strategy is really the business model that you have. And a lot of business owners start a business under one set of assumptions and think, oh, it's going to turn out this way. And then things just kind of evolve. And then all of a sudden they're like, I got a business I don't really love, I don't really like, or it's not as profitable as I want. So let's go change the strategy, which then affects the marketing and the management and the systems, right? And then at the end of the day, the mindset is the most important, because the business will grow to the limit of the owner's ability and mindset to lead, to communicate, to create a future. And so when I look at the bottleneck breakthrough method and these 6 levers, they become a guidepost for business owners to come back to over and over. And maybe once a year, it's probably good to revisit your vision and your strategy and make sure, is the business creating the lifestyle that I want? And is the strategy sustainable given the market conditions, right? Because I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of businesses since November of 2022 where the market's completely changed on them, right? You got Amazon has budget freezes throughout. Google and Microsoft and Facebook have laid off a ton of people. And so if companies aren't realizing that, hey, if we're serving those people, if we're serving that audience, we've got to change our strategy to make the product market fit. So I would say that reviewing your vision and your strategy on an annual basis is a great idea. And then it's probably a good idea quarterly to look at, okay, across our marketing systems and management, where's the biggest friction, right? And then you just constantly are reevaluating and looking at, okay, this looks like it's in a management section. We need recruiting and we need to get our recruiting dialed in. I mean, I'm helping a client right now that has 70 locations and their recruiting process is good, but not great. And we want to replace the bottom 10 to 15% of performers in their locations. And so it's like, okay, let's look at this recruiting process. And can we change those bottom performers and replace them easily over the next 6 months? Because if they replace those bottom 20% of performers, they hit all their goals, they hit all their growth goals, they hit all their performance goals. And so that becomes the bottleneck to work on now. So I think that it takes discipline. And this is where like a guy like me coming in a lot of times helps, because I'm the only one most of the time that's ever thinking about what's needed to change to create growth or to create ease. Everybody in every company, I don't know if you ever noticed this, Michael, but everybody in every company is always at capacity maintaining what they've got. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they're doing. Everybody's busy maintaining what's already happening. So if we need to create, we have to add more energy. We have to add more intentional implementation to get results, to get a different result.
I came across this and I'm not sure if you can help me answer this. So I read a story of his name is was that Sam. He ran one of the biggest marketing agency. I forgot last name, something, whatever. And then all of a sudden he fell out of love with his agency. So so in your opinion, using the lens of 6 levels of growth or bottleneck breakthrough, what would have caused it? Or how would you realign entrepreneurs? Or suddenly they have many stuff going on and fell out of love of the business that they create successfully earlier.
Yeah.
What's your thought on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great one. And I think entrepreneurs get bored really easily. And they use their business as a means of stimulation, satisfaction, whatever, to create, to innovate. And I tell them constantly, and it's oftentimes right when the business is getting stable and really profitable is when it's most boring to an entrepreneur. And so I tell them, stop looking to your business for that stimulation, for that novelty. Go get a hobby, go start another business. I mean, I've even joked and said, go get a mistress. It'll be cheaper and less damaging if you have an affair than you destroying your company. But find something else that brings novelty, because once the business, it's like the ultimate irony, Michael, of like, once the business is the most profitable and the most stable is when it's the most boring most times. And so it's to change your perspective that this business has to serve your novelty needs, that dopamine button, that creative energy, and just leave it and let it run, because your employees probably love it now because you're not changing everything on them all the time. And go find stimulation elsewhere. Go buy another company, go volunteer, go climb Mount Everest, whatever. Like, just don't affect the existing company.
And actually the name is Sam Owens.
Oh, Sam
and
Owens. Yep.
Sam Owens
Consulting.com. Yep.
and consulting.com. So,
Yep.
and then through the story that he ultimately wind down his business and sold consulting.com, and now he's CEO of startup
School.
schools. School. So, like I said, I guess if
now he's different. I know of Sam. I don't know him personally, but he had built consulting.com to be such a success, and he had no money needs, no monetary needs. So at that point, he's just in creator mode, right? Like he's got all his bills paid. He's got enough money in the bank for years to come. So he is a true innovator, and he just wants to innovate. And there are guys, I've got a good friend, George Temple. He's a great innovator, and he built a company years ago. He's a videographer, and he built a company years ago before YouTube called Sermon Spice. And it was a website for churches to go get video assets and graphic assets for their sermons and for worship and stuff. And he launched it in 2004, and it took off like a rocket. But George is not a manager. George is an innovator. He's a videographer. He does video production work. And they grew real quick, and they got to about 5 or 6 million. Again, the $5 million death spot, right? And they didn't put a leadership team in place. His sons were too young. They're a little younger than me at the time. And they kind of floundered, and they just floundered. But they were the first in the market. They had all this growth, all this demand, and they got offered to be acquired at that time by a couple different companies. And they turned it down because they thought, oh, we're going to keep growing. This was in 2006, 2007, they got offered to be acquired. Well, as you know, in 2007 and 8, the market turned and the church's budgets went down, as along did their revenue. And so they floundered a bit, and then finally got some things sorted and sold it in 2012 for a fraction of what they would have sold it for in 2006 or 7. And so in that case, George has admitted, I'm not picking on him or telling anything here that he wouldn't be willing to share publicly, but he admitted that he's great at starting and getting him off the ground, and then needs to get out. And so
the growth path, and that's exactly that's why I brought it to you, and you said to change perspective by having some hobby. And in the case of Sam, maybe he just just let it run, and
he's an innovator,
and find schools outside, and and not totally destroying it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, Sam has had plenty of money, and he's fine, stable, but he probably didn't have any thought of like the existing employees and existing users of consulting.com and that wanted more. So he just was like, I'm shutting it down. And so there's so many layers to it that it is hard to know the exact right move. But I do think knowing your spot of the entrepreneurial growth, if you really only want to be that startup guy that gets them off the ground and gets them going and then hands it off, like do that. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that are just innovators like that. And so can you share with the audience some of the way to work with you? Take this one to the next level? Yeah. I think the fun part that you reached out to me about was this course that I recently launched for Bottleneck Breakthrough through our friend Perry Marshall, his group. Perry actually came to me and said, Josh, I think you should do this. And my book's been out for 6 years now, and I've done a lot of consulting, but I've never done a training program. And so you can check that out and go to perrymarshall.com/breakthrough and still get access to it, still get in. It's 13 weeks long, and we just had our first meeting this week, so you can get access to that recording and dive in. But I'm meeting with business owners and just helping them learn the process and tackle their bottlenecks while we go, so that they're getting results right away while they're learning how to do this for themselves. And then for those that want to work with me one-on-one, you can go to bottleneckbreakthrough.com, and there's an apply page and a quick little questionnaire. And I kind of go through my process of doing an assessment, figuring out where your business is at, because I can't just come in and hear what you think it needs to happen and then go fix it. That's kind of malpractice. That'd be like you, Michael, saying, oh, my knee hurts, I need a knee replacement surgery. And I'm like, okay, let's cut your knee up. Who cares? Yeah, I got to do an x-ray. I got to do some stress testing. Maybe we try some physical therapy first before we do your knee, and then maybe it's actually your hip and you got it wrong. So we do an assessment, we go through it, take about a month, and then give you that finding, recommendations, and then talk about a specific project we might help with. And my team and I come in and help you guys tackle that stuff. So there's a number of ways. I love connecting with entrepreneurs, love help pointing them to the right resources. And I think this course right now is a lot of fun.
So between, I saw that there's two tracks. One is the course and one is the sort of consultant certifications. Which one would you recommend for whom?
Yeah. So the main course is $2,500 and it comes with a 10x ROI guarantee. So if you don't feel like you've made $25,000 by the end of the 90 days, we'll refund your money, no questions asked. That's great for business owners who have, maybe they have a team that can execute with them. They want to bring some staff in and do it collaboratively together so they all learn it. Or companies who 2,500 is a stretch and they're happy to do the work themselves. That's who it's best for. Then there's a $10,000 program. It's the same. You get access to the same 13-week group calls with me, but you also get 3 one-on-one sessions. And then I dig in and look at whatever it is needed. So I've got a couple people in that right now. And I'm looking at their financials, I'm looking at their pricing, I'm looking at their Google Analytics and figuring out what their biggest bottleneck is and helping them prioritize that, give them a plan for it, and then coach them to implement it over the next 90 days. So, and that one has a 5x ROI. So if you join and don't get at least $50,000 in value, we'll refund the money, but I'm not concerned.
So that's more like
that.
a done for you kind of things, right?
Done with you. Yeah. I'm not actually like writing copy or actually going and changing things in your business, but I'm helping tackle what your biggest bottleneck is and then giving you a plan, helping you see what the execution is, and then coaching you on how to get that done with your team.
Got it. And then someone, if they wanted to learn more like consultant, if they wanted to learn about your process and then sort of, and then use that knowledge to help other business owners that's not track for that, right?
Yep. Perry has consultants in his world. So we threw that in there. There's a couple guys that have joined as consultants to just learn my process and get some checklists and documentation and assessments. So yeah, we've got that. You could join at $2,500 as a consultant. If you want to get certified, as a Bottleneck Breakthrough certified consultant, that's $5,000. And there's all details on the website. You can check that out.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. What is the number one challenge that you want to leave to my audience about the umbrella of Bottleneck and about growing business? What is your number one challenge that you want to leave to them?
Yeah, I think I just constantly come back to mindset, and at the end of the day, it's not being positive. It's not convincing yourself that you're good enough. It's not any of that stuff. It's just being willing to look at where you've got recurring patterns of frustration or dysfunction. It probably stems from a belief that you have. And so like one of the members in the new program we were talking today, they had asked about how to tackle mindset issues. And they had talked about issues of some management and pricing. And I was able to talk with her and get right into beliefs about that. It came back to her childhood. She just had some things happen where she didn't feel valuable enough and didn't feel the authority to lead. And so we talked through that, and I've got some exercises and techniques to help her clear those limiting beliefs. And it will make her a better leader, and it'll make her be able to charge what she's worth in her business. And so to me, at the end of the day, the more work you can do to heal and strengthen and love yourself more at the end of the day, the better you'll lead and the easier everything gets in your business. And I'm living proof of that. Like I've gone through the process. So like I've been in a healing journey for years and keep getting better, and my life keeps getting better. My clients keep getting better. My work gets easier. I make more money because I'm not blocking myself with open loops of second guessing everything I'm doing, or questioning if people like me, or if I'm smart enough to do these things, or if I'm going to come up with the answers, or show up on podcasts and know what to say, or all the things that hold us back from taking action, right?
Awesome. Josh, thank you so much for your time. It's
Yeah,
really,
Michael, I really appreciate your willingness
insightful.
to promote this.
I really appreciate that. All right. So let me see. For recording.